As we move forward, change is inevitable, growth is optional. We want to make sure we are opting into that growth because the change is here. It has been here for almost 6 months. And guess what? Change is coming again because every December they change the forms, and they will be changing the forms again this December. So don't you worry, I will be here talking about all the forms changes. I will be talking about everything that you need to know. So stay with me, but just know change is inevitable. It's going to happen. Let's grab onto it and move forward. Growth is what's optional. Hey everyone, welcome back to another session of Build Your Business with Brittany. I'm Brittany, a real estate agent, coach, and investor, and every Thursday at 2 p.m. we gather to share tips, strategies, and insights to help you grow your business to the next level. Whether you're a brand new agent or a seasoned pro, there's something in these trainings for you. Now let's jump into this week's topic. All right, so now let's jump into our RLA, the Residential Listing Agreement. Okay, so I'm here in my zip forms and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit if I can. Okay, so just like we always have in all of our forms, this comes as a bundle. So you'll see that the very first document that we have is not the RLA, it's actually this AD, the agency relationship. Okay, this bar popped up and I can't see now, but it's the agency relationship form. So we're gonna go through. You can see this is totally blank. One of the things that I tell you always is before you do any of this, go to your zip forms and go up to the top where it says templates and create a template, because then once you create a template, all of this stuff is done for you. So I would recommend that as we do this right now today, you go through and put this in as your templates. So I'm going to go through and we're going to check this box for seller, and we're going to put in seller Susie, and we're going to check this box for seller, and we're going to put in seller Sam. Okay. Now, remember, every time after this, any place it has seller 1 or seller 2, this is already going to be put in. So we don't need to put these in again. Now we're going to start and filling out this part of it. So it's our real estate broker firm, which is the list agent brokerage. Then the DRE license number of your brokerage DRE. Oops, what happened? Brokerage DRE. Then down here, this is where you put the agent. So this is your information. Agent, oops. Okay. Agent name. And then agent DRE right here. And then the date. So you'll notice that the date here, I can't click on, I can't change, I can't do anything with the date here. And that's because when you go to have them fill out signatures, this is going to be it's going to be connected to when they sign. So you're not putting in the date here. We'll put in the date a little bit later. So as we scroll down, now we get to the RLA. Now we get to the residential listing agreement. So what you'll notice is that it's a little bit different, and now it's like a grid. So just like all of our other forms, this is a grid. Makes it super, super easy, and it's actually really convenient to just print out a couple of these pages to take to your listing agreement, walk through them, explain to them, write in all of these things, have your seller, just do their initial and then say, I'm going to fill this out on DocuSign and send it to you via DocuSign so that you get this whole form. But you're walking through just a quick part of it. Now, of course, you can do whatever you want. This is what I do. I just bring the grid, so 2 or 3 pages maybe, and then I walk through that so that they know what they're signing. But I tell them later on, I'm going to send this to you through DocuSign. I know some agents who bring the entire document with them, and it's a lot of pages. So you can do what you want, but that's the way I do it. Okay, so now let's go back to the top. This date prepared, this is where you're going to fill in a date. And you're going to put the date that it was prepared. So if you're going to have your listing presentation on, Saturday, then I would put that's Saturday. That's when you're preparing this, because you're preparing this on that date that you meet with them. But if you already met with them and they're going to sign it today, then you want to put today's date. So the date prepared is different from the date signed, or it can be different from the date signed, because the date prepared is where you're going to refer back to. So anytime you have an addendum or a secondary document, it's going to say this document is in reference to the RLA dated this date. It's this date prepared. So you can see seller Susie and seller Sam are already in here, so we don't have to write this in again. So this is talking about the property description. So we put property address. We're going to put situated in the city, property city. Oops. Property city. Then the county. There. It's in California because this is a California form. And then we're just going to put the zip code. Now the assessor parcel number, this is the number that is associated with the land, with the property. And you're going to find this either on title, on tax records. It's pretty easy to look up. So we're just going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4. It's usually a 9-digit number. So we're going to put that in. Now is when we move on to the grid. So remember, we have all of these paragraph numbers, and all of these numbers have an explanation over here. So the explanation of the listing period is in paragraph 4G. So if we go down to 4G, this is where we're talking about 4G. This is where we're talking about the listing agreement information. And you can see that a lot of these are connected with paragraph numbers down below. So this is helpful. If you have any questions about this, you want to be sure to take a look down below. If your client has any questions, you want to refer them to take a look down below. So the listing period, we're going to say it's going to begin on this date. Make sure that you take a note of this. It is not to exceed 24 months. This is not if it is 4 units. Let's just read. If improved with 1 to 4 units and not owned by an entity. If listing period exceeds 24 months on a residential 1 through 4, this agreement is void unless seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. So if the seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership, then you can extend it longer. But if not, then if it's just a normal seller of 1 to 4 units, then it cannot exceed 24 months. So we're starting on today's date, ending on, I always like to give it a year. So I'm going to do the last day of the month in 2025. I always do the last day of the month because remember, we're thinking of scaling. So if I have all of these agreements that end or expire on different dates, that's going to be really hard. But if I know every month at the end of the month, I have things expire at the end of the month, I need to make sure to be on it before the end of the month. Okay. So also, side note, I always put the listing date. The listing period begins when I show them the property. Not when I show them. When I go to the property to do my presentation, when they agree to say, yes, we want to work with you. So even if they need a month to do repairs, even if they need 2 weeks to really fix things up, I'm still going to say that this listing period begins now because I don't want to do any work with them or help them on this property without having a signed agreement. Because they can pull out at any time and they can say, oh, never mind, I'm going to do something else with somebody else, even though you've already helped me with so much stuff. Now, keep in mind, they still can do that, but having a signed agreement makes it a little bit more difficult. So I want to make sure I have a signed agreement. Down below in the MLS document, it's going to have where it shows, and I'll point it out, it's going to say, this property is not going to go live until a certain date. And that is where we're actually going to fill that out. So just keep that in mind. I always do the listing agreement is not when it goes live, but I do it for the date that I'm talking with them. The listing price is whatever you agree upon. Let's just call it $1 million. Remember, there's the, what is that? Well, oh, we have some writing on here. Wow. I did not know that could happen. Okay, so now we're doing property specifics. This is if it's something a little bit different, like a manufactured home or probate. That's when you're going to fill this. That's when you're going to fill out a different form. It's just going to be an addendum. But for a regular property, we're just going to leave that blank. All right, compensation to seller's broker. So remember, this is only the seller side of the transaction. So this is where, remember I told you, we already have the conversation about here's what you're going to pay me. Here's all that I do for you. And for that, I charge X. So let's just say X is 3%. You can choose whatever you want. 3% of the listing price. And if any, this would be like, for instance, my office charges an admin fee, things like that per transaction. You can say that's just cost of doing business, or you can pass it along to your clients. If that's the case, you can put it in here and just leave it at that. Here is where you would say, if, for instance, you're doing a flat rate. So sometimes with like a much lower priced property, like a mobile home, a lot of agents do just a flat fee. So that's what that would be. Or if you had a compensation schedule, that would be like if you said, okay, well, if I sell your house in 3 days, I'm going to charge this. If I sell it in 12 days, I'm going to charge this. If I double end the deal, like all of that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I pretty much leave it like pretty clean. So I don't attach a compensation schedule. But if you had one, this is where it would be. All right. Question in the chat. If the listing date changes later, do you do an addendum to change the list date? Yes. There is, and I said who did the drawing. No problem. I didn't even know it could do that. Learned something new. There is an addendum. It's called it's called something about changing the listing, something like that. I'm drawing a blank. It's some kind of addendum that, yes, if you want to change anything about this, you would do an addendum. So if you wanted to change the list date, if they wanted to list in 2 months and you ran comps again and you're like, ooh, now the list price is going to be different, then you would do that addendum as well. And I'm sure the name will come to me of this form, but it's basically like a change in listing, something like that. All right. Additional buyer compensation to seller's broker if the buyer is unrepresented. So this is if the buyer is not represented. This does not apply to dual agency. So if it's dual agency, then basically like you're able to represent the buyer, but you're negotiating the fee just like you would do if it was another agent coming and trying to represent their buyer for the property. This is if a buyer is coming totally unrepresented and they're saying, hey, I want you to represent me and I want to try and get a better deal. Now, here's the thing. I don't like this at all because I don't think that an unrepresented buyer is going to get a fair deal. I don't think that it is wise for somebody to not be represented in the sale of a house. However, if you wanted to do this, this is where you would put it in and you can charge whatever you want. Some people charge less. I say you're still going to have, you're going to have now double the liability, double the work, all of that kind of stuff. So I would just put the same amount that you're doing above, but it's totally up to you, totally negotiable. You don't have to do it. Just keep in mind that it does not apply to dual agency. So it says here, if broker represents both buyer and seller, buyer side compensation shall be specified in a separate written agreement. So that's what you would do if it was dual agency. This is not talking about dual agency. All right, continuation of right to compensation for broker identified prospective buyers. So the continuation period shall be blank number of calendar days after the listing period or any extension or continuation period. So usually I put that in for about 30 days. This is basically once the listing has expired or if somebody cancels it for one reason or another, you are able to provide a list saying, hey, I helped these buyers. And if these buyers come and they want to buy this property, then I should still be able to get paid for that. So that's what this continuation period is. This is if the seller has worked with other brokers and they have an obligation. So for instance, if it's something like this, where they were working with another buyer, with another agent, and the agent says, hey, we can cancel the deal, but if any of these people come, I should get paid for that. That's where this would be listed out. All right, so items intended to be included and excluded. Now, keep in mind that for the listing agreement, this really is just for your information. This is to make sure that you're on the same page. So you don't have to list every little thing, but if there are some specifics, like I'll give you an example. The last, in this one listing that I have right now, they have a water softener that is included, that's included in the sale of the home. They're also including all appliances. So, oops, spelled wrong. Okay, there we go. They're also including all appliances. So I'm writing this down not to hold them to it, but just to make sure we're on the same page. So if I go to list it in a month and I'm like, ooh, what did they say they were including again? Did they say they wanted to keep that, didn't want to keep it? I can go back to this and say, oh yeah, that's right. But if they end up saying, oh no, never mind, we don't want to sell the refrigerator, they're not bound to it by signing this. That's not what this is. So you just want to make sure that you understand that and they understand that. This is just so that you are writing some stuff down. Like if they have excluded items, is important to list if there are things that are normally included with the sale of a house, but they want to keep it. So sometimes that's going to be a refrigerator. Maybe a lot of times it's like a chandelier or something like that that they just really want to keep, or their Ring video camera, things like that. A lot of times what I tell people is if you want to exclude them, but there are things that would normally be included, you may want to remove them first. So for instance, my client had a tree that was planted into the ground. And she was like, it's just special to me, holds sentimental value. Should I leave it? Can I take it? And I said, if you want to take it, go ahead and pull it up and put it into a pot, because usually potted plants are not included. So you just want to do some things like that just so that they understand that like these would normally be included, but we want to make sure that the buyers know that it's not included from the get-go. So same thing about this, leased items, liened items. A lot of times a solar system, like solar power, is leased or liened. And so you want to make sure that you know that, because if it is, then you want to make sure that you're starting the process or asking them to start the process of what does the transfer look like. Because sometimes, especially solar is a good example of this, sometimes they don't allow you to just transfer it into the name of somebody else. Sometimes you have to pay it off completely. My mom had that situation. She had solar and it was a lien, and they weren't able to transfer the lien. They had to pay it off in the sale of the house. So that was, like $16,000 that they had to account for. So you just want to start having that conversation up in the beginning. So that's why these things are here. Again, it's not something that they have to know or have to tell you. It's just the conversation starter. Smart home features are down here. Property will be listed in the following MLS. The primary is whatever your primary MLS is. Mine is CRMLS. if there are others that it will be listed in. So for instance, we have a little town near us, Ojai, that has its own MLS. But if we say it's going to be listed in the Ojai MLS, but also in CR MLS, that's where we would list this. This is seller instructs broker not to use or take photographs in marketing. Obviously, we don't want to do that. So we just tell them like that's only if they, for whatever reason, are not allowing that. We don't want to do that. Timing of offers. The default is that the seller instructs broker to present all offers as soon as practicable. Practicable. That is that word. Okay. So this is, you may want to say, you know, we're going to get tons of offers, so I'm not going to present them as soon as they come in. I'm going to present them on the Monday after we go live, or, you know, whatever you wanted to do. You could write in that date, or however many days after it's listed on the MLS. So again, this, you're not held to this. Oops. You're not held to this. It's just so that you're on the same page. But sometimes, like in a probate or some other times like that, the courts require a property to be listed for at least 7 days, for instance. And so you want to make sure that you're doing that everybody knows that we're not even going to look at offers for 7 days, because otherwise you have to present as soon as they all come in. Buyer supplemental offer letters. These are sometimes called love letters, buyer letters. In California, we do not do these anymore. This is not something that is common practice. It has been stopped. The reason for this is because we're trying to protect our sellers from any kind of discrimination, even accidental discrimination. If they see a buyer letter that shows a sweet, happy family, and then they see another buyer's letter that shows somebody in a wheelchair, and they choose somebody not in a wheelchair, not for any discrimination reasons, but just because that's what they decided on, that person could come back and say, this was a violation of fair housing. This was discrimination. And so we want to say, nope, we don't show any buyer letters. So the default is we are not presenting them. And then if the seller says, no, I want to see them, we're going to check this off, but it's saying the seller is acting against the broker's advice. Investigation report. So this natural hazard disclosure is automatically checked off. That's going to be ordered as soon as escrow's opened. But any of this other stuff, most of the time it happens through escrow. However, sometimes we want to do a home inspection before. Like for instance, my house that I was selling, I wanted to make sure that I did a home inspection so that the buyers knew exactly what they were getting, so that I knew exactly what I was getting. So, because I didn't want any surprises. I wanted to make sure I got clean offers, and that was what it was. And so if I wanted to do a general property inspection, I might tell them, hey, we're going to do that beforehand. And then that would be on the sellers to pay. And it's saying seller shall order and pay for any properties or reports within 5 days of this agreement. So this is totally up to you. You can determine if you want to do this. A lot of people don't, but in some areas, it's very common that you do have a property inspection, and in other areas, it's not at all. So you just want to make sure that you know what is common in your area. All right, check in the chat. Let's see. Didn't know anybody knew it was possible. So you have to check NHD and F3. Yeah, it's automatically checked, so you just can't uncheck it. So like I'm clicking on it right now, you can't uncheck it. So yes, it's automatically checked. All of the rest of these you can check and uncheck. This one you have to leave on there. Acceptation. I cannot talk today. Exceptions to ownership and title. This would be if they know that like their mom had co-signed on the property and their mom is on title. Again, not a big deal. It's just good to know this is what it is. This is kind of, I always talk about these are conversation starters. Seller intends to include a contingency to purchase replacement property as part of the transaction. This is what you would click if your seller is saying, I cannot sell this place if I don't buy the next place. So you need to make sure that you have this checked and the other form, the SPRP, which is a seller property replacement, something like that. It's a replacement property form. So you want to make sure that you know this, because sometimes your buyer is selling, but they don't have to sell to be able to buy the next property, or they don't have to buy the next property in order to sell. They have some place to go. They're good. They don't have to worry about what comes next. So you just want to make sure you understand exactly what it is that your seller is going to be doing. Seller opts out to key safe, locks, box, and signs. This is if your seller is like, I want this to be totally private, I don't want any of this stuff up, that's when you would put that. Now, some of the ways that I do things, like I don't do a sign until later on in the transaction. And the reason for that, it's strategic, but the reason for that is that I want it to be exclusive. I want it to feel really exciting, but also our sellers like when they like that additional privacy. And so they like not having a sign up. But even though I don't put up a sign, I don't check this box off because I want the option to put up a sign. So unless they tell me, no, I do not want a sign or a lockbox or anything like that, then I'm going to leave these blank. Additional terms for whatever kind of additional terms you would want to write in. And then these are automatically checked off. So you want to just leave those as is. And then we come to the end of our grid. So now the rest of this is just explanation for above. So you want to make sure that you read that and understand it. If your seller is an entity seller, LLC, corporation, trust, etc., you would check that off and fill out the rest of that. Most of the time, you're just dealing with regular people, but a lot of times you can see that you have, like, your sellers have their property in a trust. And so you would want to put that as the entity buyers, but they can still sign as them. I like to have my clients fill this out just because I then send this to my TC, and then she has all of this information, and it's not coming from me. So I'm not accidentally, putting in the wrong email address or wrong phone number. So my TC has all of this. So I like to have them fill all of this out. And then agent brokerage, remember we already have this filled out, but you want to make sure that the rest of this is filled out in your templates so that you're not having to do it every single time. Let's see, what is this in here as? Agent brokerage address, and then the city, state, and zip. And then if there is, this is the brokerage, and then you have the agent name. You want to make sure you have your agent email address. And your DRE is already in there, and then your telephone number. Okay. And then if there is a secondary broker on here or agent, you can fill that out, and you would be filling out more than one agent from the same firm represents them, or two brokers with different companies or co-listing, and then you fill out the different forms. So here in this multiple listing service addendum, this is where we are wanting to make sure that we list the information that I mentioned before. Well, let's just go through it. So remember when I told you these are terms and conditions that are incorporated and made as a part of the residential listing agreement, dated, and it's the date of the agreement. So it's not the date they sign. That could be different. We always have to refer back to the date of the agreement. So that's what that is. And it's not automatically on here. Okay, so here's what I was telling you. Seller instructs broker to begin marketing the property to the public on, and it's a different date from today. So remember, when you get your listing agreement, you have, I think it's 48 hours, 24 to 48 hours to put it into the MLS. Well, I don't want to do that because I always want to make sure I'm taking professional photos and doing all kinds of stuff. But remember, I want that listing agreement signed right away. So I'm always going to fill this part out, and I'm going to say, okay, well, if we need, let's say we need 3 weeks to get it done, we're not going to market the property to the public until that date. Now, we used to require this SELM, the SELM form, for this if we said we're not going to market it until later. But from what I'm hearing, you don't need that anymore for this. This is if we're saying we're not marketing it to the public and we are specifically like not doing it. It's basically going to be registered through the MLS, et cetera, et cetera. My understanding is that you don't need that separate form if you're just waiting on it. You just have to fill this out. All this clear cooperation, all of this kind of stuff, you just leave blank unless you want to check off these specific instances. But you'll see all of these things that you would be checking off are very not common. So it's just read and sign, seller advisory, broker compensation, possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, fair housing, consumer privacy, and we're done. So now we have gotten to the end of that. Don't forget, we're here every Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Join me live by registering at the link in the description below and get your questions answered in real time. I love helping you succeed. Thanks for joining me for another Build Your Business with Brittany. Let's keep building, growing, and closing those deals. I'll see you next Thursday at 2 p.m.